springtime. It's towards the end of April. The sunlight levels actually now are the same as around the 20th of August. And if you think how much warmth there is then and everything growing fast, whereas now, not much is growing because it's too cool. Today's been a bit warmer. We've been up to 18 centigrade, 64 Fahrenheit, but that's really quite peaky compared to what it has been with a lot of frost. So most of the time, for most of my garden at this time of year, certainly for new plantings, I'm using covers. And what are good covers, which ones to use, whether to support them or not, are things I want to show you in this video. And this bed we planted 5 weeks ago with a range of vegetables, nearly all transplants, one direct sowing, which is carrots, you'll see. And already actually there's some potential harvest here. Multi-sown turnips, for example. There's 4 lovely turnips in a clump there. And I'm growing them as a catch crop between 2 rows of potatoes. And peas. The potatoes are showing one reason for using fleece, particularly if you can support it a bit, because in the middle they're much stronger, whereas on the edge there's frost damage on the tips of the potatoes where they were touching the fleece. And that's one potential reason for using supports, which is to suspend the cover above a crop, because you can get frost damage where it's touching leaves. In our climate, normally that's not much problem, but this year it has been actually, because we've had, in April, we've had so far, out of 23 days, we've had 15 frosts. And that makes it the most, in terms of frost number, the most frosty month of the year, even more than January. So it's just an example of how fleece can help, but it's not an automatic frost protection. It's actually more about protecting from wind and keeping off the weather. And generally a slight lift of temperature, you can feel the soil's a little bit warmer. And even new sowings like carrots, so the tiny little carrot seeds I sowed there actually about 3.5 weeks ago, and they're looking pretty strong. You know, it's always a bit touch and go with an early sowing of carrots. Is it going to make it? They're tiny seeds. They've not got a lot of energy in the seed, not like a big potato or broad bean even. And they need decent conditions to get going. And it's kind of helped a bit actually that it's been dry. Then we've got onions, lettuce, beetroot, spinach. So all things that actually can tolerate frost, because it has frozen a bit under that cover, but which really benefit from the slight lift of temperature. And here again we got a whole bed of beetroot. This one is covered, and we didn't have it under a hoop to start with. The fleece was sitting just on the plants, as we'll see up there in a minute. But it's when we had these long sequences of frost, and I could see the damage on the leaves, again, which I'll show you up there, that I decided we needed these hoops. And normally I don't use hoops, because when you put a cover on a hoops like this, you can see how the wind's blowing it. It means the wind can get under it a bit, and that sometimes, you know, this is a moderate wind, it's not a strong wind. If the wind was stronger, which it can easily be at this time of year, this is potentially can blow off, and you can spend a lot of time rescuing your covers. So that's why generally I like to keep them flat on the ground. So there's different factors to weigh up. And then here we have a vegetable which is growing beautifully without any cover. I mean, how is that? How is this spinach so fantastic? And that's because we sowed it last August, so 8 months ago, and then transplanted it right at the end of August, and that got well established. It got a very strong root system. It's a very hardy plant. We covered it for a while actually in January, February, when the rabbits were eating it, mainly as a pest protection. So that's another use for these covers, and that did help to get it going a bit, but it's growing fine without a cover basically. Less frost damage, and there's no need for supports or any of that. You know, if you can grow that cover, it's fantastic, but they definitely have a place for helping things on early. And over there, there's some lovely spring onions, salad onions, which we're harvesting at the moment. And they, again, growing without any cover because they were sown and transplanted last September. So let's go and have a look now. There's plenty more covers over here, and different ones. I can show you the different types you can use and different ways of supporting them. So the different types of cover I can show you here are, for example, this one's a bit different. I only tried it last year for the first time because fleece itself, normal horticultural fleece, is a plastic, basically. It's a polypropylene spun in some way, so it doesn't degrade, I'm afraid, but it can last a long time. If you get the thicker fleece, it lasts for several uses, several years. But this one, by contrast, is cotton. It's muslin, and I found it from a mill in the north of England, and I'm not sure what they use it for. But anyway, I thought, why mightn't this work? And so I gave it a go, and it does actually work in much the same way. You can get nice protection from wind and keeping off the worst of the weather. But like all fleece, it does the thing where if it's sitting on the leaves and there's a frost, even of these broccoli, there's a broccoli or two up there, and they look a lot better now. I'm really delighted to see them like this, actually. If you see them 10 days ago, you might have thought, oh, are they going to make it? Because originally all this planting we did just under 4 weeks ago, and we had the fleece covers and the muslin right on the plants like I normally do, and which normally works. This is the first year it hasn't actually worked so well like that. So fleece, the normal one, I wanted to show you here ways of supporting. So there we got hoops. Those hoops, by the way, are 4mm high tensile steel, work really well. This is a batten. And when the plants were smaller, this one's not actually doing a lot now because the lettuce themselves are pushed up quite well. Their outermost leaves are pretty much touching the fleece again, so actually I need to change this batten. We'll take it out. It's just sitting on the ground, and then I'll put hoops in just probably for another week or so. You know, might be 2 though this year. Just not showing signs of warming up like it's maybe one would hope. So these covers, you know, that's another question, is how long do they stay on? Well, it depends on the weather. You don't want fleece on when it's really hot. When I say hot, actually, for those of you in continental climates, I don't mean really, really hot, but when it gets above 20 centigrade or 70 Fahrenheit roughly, with bright sun, that the plants can not exactly cook, but unless they're well watered, that can cause a moisture issue. They can wilt really fast. And here we got some beautiful broccoli again, which has done slightly better. Actually, that does make an interesting comparison. I think the fleece is slightly warmer than the muslin. The muslin's still working well. The issue with the muslin is that because it does degrade, where we're supporting it on stones, you can see that we're doing very simple supports here. You know, you don't have to bury it in soil or anything like that. Just a few stones, but you could use stakes or sticks, but a heavy stone or rock that works well about every pace, every metre or so, sometimes more even. And the thickness, 30 grams a square metre, whereas previously I was using a thinner one, and that's this one here. So this is quite a bit older actually, this fleece, and partly that's why it's got a few holes in. And holes can be an issue, but not more for insects, which we're not using it for, than for weather. So for the weather here, I found actually the thinner fleece, this is 25 grams a square metre compared to the 30, I prefer it. It still serves to keep pretty much equivalent amount of warmth in and wind off. And what I like about it is you can see the crop. This is a recent planting of sorrel, broadleaf sorrel, and just getting established. I'm not too worried about a bit of frost damage on its leaves, so that's why it doesn't need a support. But also I find this slightly lighter, thinner fleece doesn't weigh down so much on the crop, and so that reduces impact of things like frost. And I like it because you can see the plants through it, you know, and so if there are issues, or you lose a few, you can take it off and replant, whatever it might be. So that's 25 grams square metre. At the moment, you can't buy it, I don't think, anyway. But I'm negotiating with Gardening Naturally, actually, to see if they might stock it, because they're good suppliers of all this stuff. And we'll see what happens. And I want to show you then over here a couple of different covers you can also use. The two covers I'm showing you here are not so much about warmth, particularly this one, because this is mesh and it's a nylon weave, tight, close, small enough holes to keep insects out, and pests off. And actually, it's on here because of potential pigeon damage over spring cabbage. So these are cabbages that we transplanted last early October from a September sowing, and you can see the result is pretty much going to plan to have a nice cabbage. I don't think they're going to make a tight heart, but plenty of lovely green leaves at a time of year, late April, early May, like late spring, when although the weather's quite nice, there's not a lot of big green plants ready to eat. This one of them has actually gone to seed a bit here. That's not to plan, but that's also edible. So this mesh is not providing much extra warmth. It has cut the wind off. So these were transplanted here a long time ago, and this has been on all the time. And the virtue of mesh is that the wind does blow through it a bit. And so, this has stood the gales of winter without blowing away, but we've had quite a few stones on it. That helps. And then here is thermacrop, which the name thermacrop, thermaheat, suggests it's pretty warm, but actually I don't find it that warm. Again, more about keeping off the wind. So it lets a bit of wind through, which is nice, that's fine. And we got it on hoops because it is a bit heavier than fleece, so I prefer to use it with some kind of support. And these lettuce, actually they're not doing quite as well as I'd hoped. The cold nights have set them back a bit. They've been in the ground for just over 4 weeks, in fact. But we've had to replace quite a few because there were some soil grubs, leather jackets here. So some of these are recent plantings in amongst some older plantings, which, looking down there, you can see actually there's some quite nice lettuce there, which will come ready for picking in about 2 weeks, I should think. And this covers I only put it on Monday. Before that it was fleece, which was sitting on these plants. And there you can see some fleece which has kind of served its time a bit, where it's got eaten by rooks and big holes. And also over there's some broad beans damaged by frost where they were touching the fleece, but they're surviving. And generally speaking, that's the tone of using these materials in the spring. Is you will experience sometimes some problems, some damage, but generally they are brilliant at keeping the worst of the weather off. And at the same time, we've got rabbits here, so covering against weather like this automatically also protects the plants from rabbits and pigeons in the case of those. Cabbage, where I would not have used fleece over winter because the fleece is not as strong as mesh. So if you're on a really windy site, it might be worth actually just looking at using mesh, which will moderate most of the wind. But apart from that, fleece is great just for this period of spring when we've got a light surplus and a temperature deficit, and it balances out those two. I don't use fleece in the autumn because it's the other way around. We've got plenty of temperature, it's quite warm, but also a shortage of light. And so these covers keep out a bit of light, maybe as much as 30%. But at the moment that doesn't matter, because that 30% is the bit that's not being used by the plants. They can't use it because it's not warm enough for them. So it's moderating the light and converting it into the warmth that's missing. And the main time of operation in temperate climates is late winter through to mid to late spring. And in the summer you don't want to use fleece, it's too hot, but you can use mesh because it's great against insects.